How can we navigate together through and out of dizziness? How does dizziness influence, alter, or shape our social, digital, and physical environments? How do our social, digital, and physical environments influence, alter, or shape the experience of dizziness? But what is dizziness? To explain dizziness, right away this throws us into a paradoxical situation. Should an introduction to dizziness at least try to disorient? Could it then, however, still be considered an introduction? We seem faced with an uncomfortable alternative. Either give up on the ambition to perform at least some dizzying effect in this piece, or to accept that there is something deeply paradoxical about our gesture. Consequently, our introduction might, at least to some extent, serve to orient as much as disorient. Dizziness is more than a dizzy feeling. The first section of our recent book, Dizziness a Resource, is titled Naming Dizziness, and it summarizes the process of naming and defining the phenomenon. It addresses the cultural differences of the semantics surrounding dizziness and describes the process of naming as a methodological, cross-disciplinary, and artistic factor. Our polysemic use of the word is rooted in its initial translation from the German Taumel, and their meanings are not strictly identical. Taumel describes the staggering, unpredictable movement of the dizzy body, as well as the positive, negative, and ambiguous sensations of being dizzy, confused, or unbalanced. Moreover, Taumel is frequently used as a metaphor for the unexpected and unpredictable. In this manner, our project uses the word dizziness in extension of the original meaning of the English term. Synthesizing artistic, physiological, and philosophical approaches, this project redefines dizziness as unpredictable movement or the sensation of such movement, causing a shift from the given to the uncertain. Through this redefinition, we aim to get hold of an ephemeral phenomenon that emerges on different scales and in different contexts. In essence, however, dizziness is a phenomenon of the senses, of sensing and of sense. The word sense differentiates into three transversal fields: sensory input, emotion, and meaning. Along these three transversal fields, we will discuss the phenomenon and conceptualization of dizziness from a cross-disciplinary perspective. And indeed, dizziness is more than feeling dizzy. We understand dizziness not only as a phenomenon of sense, as emotion, or of sensory input impacting our sensory organ, the vestibular system, but also as a phenomenon of sense, creating meaning. The interdependence of sense and sensing, of cultural constructs and sensuality, of somatic and cognitive knowledge, can only be conceived as being a complex relation of creation and dissolution, of habituations and transformations, pertaining to our shared reality and our individual experiences. Their interaction reflects our respective cultural framing and our individual and collective memories. The balance and the readjustments of these interrelations orient us, and they determine our abilities to navigate states of dizziness. Enjoyable to some extent, being out of kilter evokes feelings of alienation towards the self and/or the world. It reduces predictability and thus our ability to exercise control. And it increases feelings of loss, exposedness, and vulnerability. We all share the experience of an unexpected fall or a sudden change. Occurrences that can pull the rug out from under our feet and can leave us with feelings of profound disorientation and dizziness, causing anxiety. Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard's The Concept of Anxiety offers a specific definition of dizziness in view of its time's religious and philosophical context. And he first distinguishes anxiety from fear.
Anxiety is altogether different from fear and similar concepts that refer to something definite, whereas anxiety is freedom's actuality as the possibility of possibility. Anxiety may be compared with dizziness. He whose eye happens to look down the yawning abyss becomes dizzy. But what is the reason for this? It is just as much in his own eye as in the abyss, for suppose he had not looked down. Hence, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which emerges when freedom looks down into its own possibility. Freedom succumbs to dizziness. He who sank in possibility, his eye became dizzy. His eye became confused. Whoever is educated by possibility is exposed to danger. On the other hand, whoever is educated by possibility remains with anxiety. Then the assaults of anxiety will not be such that he flees from them. Anxiety becomes a serving spirit that against its will leads him where he wishes to go.
Hereby, Kierkegaard makes a bold claim. Yet, dizziness affects people differently, depending on class, gender, age, education, geographical origin, religious background, and other dimensions of social, cultural, physiological, and psychological difference. Prevalent emotional conditions influence the experiencing of dizziness, pointing to the situational, temporal, and conditional character of the phenomenon. The impact of this ambiguous force is also depending on how we approach it, how we understand and address it. The emotions dizziness invokes in us are germane because they orient us. More recently, British affect studies scholar Sarah Ahmed addressed this issue, stressing that
feeling become ideas and values, that is, judgments about things. To hate or to fear is to have a judgment about a thing as it approaches.
Now, in a corporeal sense, dizziness is a sensation caused by actual movement or the impression of such movement. Either way, it unbalances us and endangers our being stable and upright. The vestibular system is the sensory apparatus that signals the coordinates of our spatial position to the brain, affording our sense of balance and spatial orientation. Moreover, we have to mention that the vestibular system also influences our emotional balance and cognitive capacity. Together with the cochlea, the vestibular system constitutes the labyrinth of the inner ear, sending signals primarily to the neural structures that control our eye movement and to the muscular structure that keeps us upright and balanced. We get dizzy when an impairment in perception arises, as for example in kinetosis. Kinetosis, better known as motion sickness or travel sickness, is now making headlines as virtual reality sickness. Kinetosis can occur during sensory exposure to motion, be it physical motion or visual motion, and only those without a functioning vestibular system are fully immune. Kinetosis is caused by a conflict between sensory inputs of self-movement and the pattern that is expected on the basis of our previous experience of self-movement. The brain reacts to this conflicting information as if we were poisoned. We start to feel sick and our body movements are becoming increasingly unbalanced and unhinged. However, our often overlooked sensory organ is not only present in humans or mammals, or animals for that matter. Even plants possess sensory cells for balance and orientation. They are gravity perception cells, are to ensure adaptive growth via gravitropism. Gravitropism is the downward growth of roots and the upward growth of stems. Through these sensory cells, the plant emerges from soil as a seedling, and it thereby manages its growth to be adaptive, ensuring anchorage, reaching soil water, minerals, and light. Tied into the physiology of dizziness, balance, and orientation are questions of gravity and verticality. Our first understanding of verticality, and possibly our first abyssal experience, happens at birth, when leaving the low gravity space of the womb. At that stage, our balance organ, detecting gravity, controlling body balance and orientation, is still developing, and it will only be fully developed once we've reached adulthood. Now, coming back to Kierkegaard's thoughts on the abyss, we could conclude that we become aware of our potential only through this experience of verticality, dizziness, and anxiety that is at the same time an experience of freedom, creation, and being in the world. Dizziness occurs when we have the possibility of possibility, and this exposes dizziness and anxiety's generative potential. In reference to Kierkegaard, existential psychologist Rollo May asserts that creating means
actualizing one's possibilities. Creating involves destroying the status quo, destroying old patterns within oneself, progressively destroying what one has clung to from childhood on, and creating new and original forms and ways of living.
This process of actualization is a process of transformation, affecting our orientation, the understanding of ourselves and of our cultural, social, digital, and physical environments, as we can clearly see in the current COVID crisis. We have to readjust and redefine who and where we are, how we communicate, and what value we attribute to the elements of the social, physical, digital, and imaginary worlds we inhabit. Citing Kierkegaard,
whoever is educated by possibility is exposed to danger.
We would like to strengthen that dizziness has as much destructive as generative potential. The reflection of and the memories connected to dizziness shape individual and collective beliefs and thus impact on our capacity to creatively transform and navigate states of dizziness. Affecting the transversal fields of sensation, emotion, and meaning, dizziness constitutes a generative means to shake normative assumptions and perceptions and to unsettle prevalent modes of orientation, knowledge production, and organization of togetherness. Thank you.